Barack Obama came into office, the country was in a recession, and we could have had a depression. And so actually the previous administration, George Bush and the Secretary of Treasury, were able to get somewhere between $700 and $800 billion appropriated by a Republican Congress. And they weren't happy about it, but they came up with the money. And then Obama was elected, and his Secretary of Treasury, Tim Geithner, and the chairman of the Federal Reserve Board, they all worked together, and they loaned the money to the banks, and the banks, a couple of years later, actually repaid all that money with a $26 billion of interest. But this saved a run on the banks, and it gave a chance, and there was new legislation as well to prevent the banks from making the same mistakes in the future. A couple of things about Obama. During his presidency, unemployment has been cut in half. The growth of the national debt has been cut in half annually. Inflation is low. Wall Street is well. The dollar is strong. And there's a long list of either legislation that has been approved by Congress, or when Obama no longer had a Democrat Congress, and he had to rule by executive action, at least for the remainder of his presidency, that'll be in place. So what about Barack Obama? Is he a bad president, a good president, or is he a great president? Well, I would say it's fairly safe to say he's a good president. And as far as whether he's going to be a very good president, an excellent president, or a great president, that all depends. If a candidate is elected, and I'm thinking the Democrat is elected, and Hillary Clinton is able to take the Obama agenda and pass the authorization and the appropriation legislation, and then public administrators and the private sector all working together within the United States. There's teamwork and there's communication within our country, and we also reach out to our allies and our competitors. We're going to be a success in terms of the Paris Climate Accord or the Iran nuclear agreement. We'll put a stop or greatly retard global warming, and we'll keep nuclear weapons out of the hands of Iran. So with Barack Obama, I have a good feeling about him. He's at minimum a good candidate. In terms of whether he's going to be he was a good president rather, he is a good president rather, but is he going to be an excellent president? It all depends. Time will tell. In terms of, now let's move on. In terms of the two candidates for President of the United States, are they candidates for change? Briefly, Donald Trump, in some ways, is a candidate for radical change. He wants to slap tariffs against Chinese imports. He wants to build a wall with Mexico, which might interfere with our trade with Mexico. He wants to perhaps scuttle the North American Free Trade Agreement. He wants to deport between 11 and 12 million undocumented residents. If he gets his wish and all of these things happen, it's a radical change. But I have yet to be convinced it's good change. I'm hopeful I'm wrong and he's right if he's elected. But I think the United States could easily slide into a recession or a depression. In terms of what else is he for? Well, it's a big question mark. He basically wants to roll back just about everything Obama has done, and it's hard to say what he's going to replace it with. So I put a big question mark over Barack Obama. In terms of some of his other policies, it's the standard Republican line. He wants massive tax cuts, which are really going to affect positively big businesses and rich people. And he also wants to rearm the military, even though I'm not really sure what he wants to do with it, except maybe invade Syria. So in a sense that Obama is advocating policies that are status quo that were advocated by Ronald Reagan and George W. Bush. So Hillary Clinton, I was watching about her. I was watching the other day. I was watching CNN and Wolf Blitzer is on, and what happened was Blitzer is comparing Hillary to Bernie Sanders, who wanted to break up the banks. Hillary doesn't want to do that. She wants to expedite. She wants to take her time compared to Bernie raising the federal minimum wage. Bernie wants it overnight to be at a certain level, and Hillary wants to do it over a staggered period of time, and so on. And she basically goes down through Bernie's agenda and compares Hillary as being a more aligning closer to Bernie Sanders, but taking a more pedestrian pace. But the way I look at it is Hillary's probably trying to figure out, how do we pay for all this stuff? Bernie Sanders never particularly explained how with all the wonderful things that he wanted to do, how we're going to pay for it. In terms of Hillary, if she doesn't introduce anything new, if she merely takes Obama's agenda, and let's just take one policy, if she decides that it's a major priority for the United States to be compliant with the Paris Climate Accord, it's going to require additional authorization legislation by Congress. It's going to require funding. It's going to require teamwork and communication between different agencies that make up the federal government, between different levels of government, federal, state, and local. The government's going to have to interface, connect with private industry within this country, and we're also going to have to reach out to our allies and our adversaries who we still need to work with, like the Chinese. So in a sense, you could say, well, Hillary's just for incremental change, because she's just taking Obama's agenda, and she just wants to take what he's done. But these are not self-executing policies. It's going to require the best and the brightest we have in this country working full-time, because let's face it, global warming is huge, and we still don't really know what level of activity and energy and funding we need to be successful. So I think that if she's elected president and then she goes ahead and she's successful, and I'm just taking one of many policies that Obama has put out there, that's going to be a tremendous achievement. So it's not radical, it's not incremental, it's not the status quo. There's only one word for it. It's very important. And we might need to spend billions now to save trillions later. And only history will know what she did and what she overcame if she is elected president. And right now it's going to be a close race, and we're not really sure how it's going to come out. Let's move on now to some thoughts I have about an infrastructure rebuilding process. I think that what the United States needs to do is we need to start small. We need a well thought out plan. And there's an old saying, success breeds success. I think the American people would like to see money spent on infrastructure rebuilding processes, including rebuilding roads and bridges, pulling out lead-laced pipes in places like Flint, Michigan, where we're poisoning our kids. Those are just 3 examples of many examples, but I think the American people would like to see the federal government become successful. If the federal government is successful, and let's start small. We start small, we take corrective measures during a project, and then we develop best practices. American people, if they see that their tax dollars are being well spent, and they see that we're being successful in rebuilding the country, people are going to start to get really excited about it. They'll see that government works. You see, what happens is 70 and 80 years ago, Franklin Roosevelt, during the New Deal, what he was doing, he was engaging in processes whereby we can build the Hoover Dam. We could create the Tennessee Valley Authority. This created low-cost electricity to people throughout the country, and it put people to work with jobs, and those people even though the government had to pay money to build these things, people were put to work. There were jobs, people were paying taxes with those jobs, and then we're rebuilding things that are going to last 50 to 100 years. And so I think that if the American people see that their tax dollars are going well, are being well spent, people won't mind paying their taxes. Because I think what we need to do is this. I think we could borrow. Well, people will develop confidence that government works, and I also think that that's why I'm talking about Johnson and Reagan. I think that if we reach a point where we have pilot projects, corrective actions, best practices, and people start to develop confidence that government works, then we could do some robust planning. And, you know, chance favors the well-prepared plan, to borrow from Louis Pasteur and change that quote just a little bit. I think that what we could do then, a couple of years into a new administration, is start to develop a roadmap, robust plans. Maybe at some point, for some forms of infrastructure, whether it's mass transportation, it's renewable sources of energy, it's a GI Bill to get our kids through college, public colleges, and it could be a number of areas that are infrastructure. We have a robust plan of different kinds of infrastructure that need to be built, trillions and trillions of dollars, could be over years, could be over several decades. But I think if we plan big and we decide what role should government play, should the federal government take the lead? Should it be delegated to the states or the local government? Also, in some cases, it may be best if the federal government passes the laws, but it's carried out by the private sector. Maybe we do competitive sealed bids, and we get the best contractors, the best product at an affordable cost, and we let the private sector do it. The federal government will be monitoring, auditing it. They'll be ensuring environmental regulations are in place. So I think that if we have a robust plan, but we're flexible, and we sometimes, like Johnson, believe that effective governmental action is the remedy. At other times, maybe government could help jumpstart things, but then hand it over to the private sector, and they can rebuild on certain projects as well. So I think we need to channel Johnson and Reagan. I think that they were both successful for different reasons, and I think that maybe they tried too hard. Johnson tried too hard at effective governmental action. Reagan relied too much on the private sector, but that doesn't diminish what they did. There's no book you read to becoming president, and it's not an easy process. All we can do is think about what George Santayana once said. He said that those who don't learn from the past are destined to repeat it in the future. The really tricky thing about what Santayana said, although it resonates inside me, the really tricky part is when you look at history, what factors are key? What factors are relevant or irrelevant? And also, things change. People's expectations change. Everything changes. So it's really hard to know what's the next best step to do. And that's why we all sort of need to be patient. And I think we could create win-win situations by thinking small, pilot projects, corrective actions, and then we develop best practices. Then we could go robust in terms of planning and then implementing projects. And then we do these projects, we either government takes the lead or the private sector takes the lead, but the government is still involved as sort of like a co-pilot. So I've basically, without telling you, I'm going to summarize. I've basically summarized my approach for what America needs to do. And let me just part now with you and say this is Michael Smook for YouTube Commentaries. Today is Friday, September 23rd. The year is 2016. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I'm excited about what's going on these days. On Monday, I'm going to watch the debates between Trump and Clinton. And I haven't been this excited since I watched the Kennedy-Nixon debates from 1960 this morning. I watch them all the time. I really admire both Richard Nixon and John Kennedy. Anyway, until next time, goodbye and good luck.